All right. Let's get started, Stefan. Welcome, everyone. And again, thank you for attending today's webinar on AI-driven application monitoring. No coding. We're just going to be prompting today. Um, with us today, I have Stefan Judis, our developer relations at Checkly. Myself, Dan Giordano. I run marketing at Checkly, and I'll be emceeing a little bit and running through the webinar with you all. We have a couple of slides, housekeeping, a couple things to show, and then we're going to get right into real world scenarios. So first things first, yes, I promise you will receive all the resources and prompts and a video of the webinar via email later this week. We'll try to get that out to you tomorrow. And then also, if you do have questions during today's session, just please put them in the Q&A bucket and not the comment folder. It's a lot easier for me to follow along. So please drop it in QA, and we will get to it either during the webinar today or at the end.
That's a good intro. All right, shall we kick it off?
Let's do it.
All right, everybody. Welcome, I'm Stefan, and today we're going to talk about the thing that everybody's talking about the elephant in the room. And of course, we're talking about AI, right? I'm not sure what social network you're using. If you're using any, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's a little bit concerned, excited, scared, and there are a lot of different opinions out there right now, right? So when we look at a little bit of what happened over the last 6 months, we had statements like this. So Dario Amodei from Anthropic, he's the CEO, said something like, in 3 to 6 months, AI is writing 90% of the source code. I mean, we now have August. I don't know about you. I'm not sure if that holds. Kind of depends on where you're on the spectrum of the vibe coding challenge. But shortly after, so he said that in March. So shortly after, Sam Altman also jumped the conversation and he said that, I don't know, but AI will make coders 10x more productive and not necessarily replace them. And of course, that is a message that I can stand behind way better because I like my job and I like to continue doing what I do. But I think everybody is pretty clear right now on the fact that LLMs are here to stay. Regardless what we think, if we're riding the hype wave or if we're a little bit skeptical, this technology is there to stay. And what we will cover in this webinar is answering this question here. So what does it mean for application monitoring, right? And we might be a little bit biased because we're at the Checkly webinar, but we ourselves are also asking ourselves, what does it mean for Checkly, right? Where now everybody is AIing, LLMing, vibe coding, and that is an interesting question. And we will answer this question here today. If you haven't heard of Checkly, or if you're new to what we do at Checkly, so Checkly is an application reliability platform for modern engineering teams. We allow you to detect, communicate, and resolve issues faster than ever before. We have 1,100 paying customers. We help you to achieve maximum uptime and reliability, improve your incident response times. We bet a lot on monitoring and with browser checks and API checks, and we love the Microsoft's Playwright testing framework. And we are pretty much AI ready, but we will cover that in just a little bit. If you haven't seen the product yet, what you see here is the Checkly dashboard. Here you can get an overview of all your Checkly monitoring. So we see here 3 different monitors. And what sets Checkly apart is that we believe in a monitoring as code approach. Everything you see in the Checkly web app, every monitor, every large journal, and every dashboard can be configured from within code, from JavaScript or TypeScript. And then you can use the Checkly CLI to test your monitoring or deploy to production to then, well, get an alert or get a notification when something is off. So in this example, we are creating a new API check for an API endpoint. And this is classical uptime monitoring. We want to see that this API endpoint responds with the proper 200 status code. And the same applies for more complex checks, right? So here we have what we call a multi-step check, which can be a combination of multiple API calls. Think of your CRUD operations, right? Where you have an API that supports get, post, put, and delete. You can put that all into a single monitor and put it into the Checkly infrastructure to get notified, alerted when something on the way, let it be the get, the put, the delete, is not behaving and is not doing what it's supposed to do. And of course, if you're having web properties, right, you want to test end-to-end user behavior with a real browser, because that's the real deal at the end of the day, right? For these kind of cases, we support browser checks, which allow you to spin up headless Chrome and run it on a schedule, run it from wherever in the world and test that your logins work, your add to cart flow works, whatever you're selling, building, doing, make sure that it works from around the world. So when we now ask the question, okay, is Checkly AI ready? Yeah, the answer to this is, thanks to monitoring as code and our code-driven approach, Checkly by definition always was and always will be AI ready. So you see here what we call constructs, right? These kind of things control your monitoring infrastructure. It could be all sorts of monitors, alert channels, status pages, even dashboards. All this can be tested and live and deployed from within your code base. It's all text. And we all know, well, LLMs are pretty decent with wrangling, reading, and creating text, right? So what we're going to do in this webinar is we're going to use the new cool kid in town, Claude Code. If you haven't used Claude Code is pretty much Anthropic's answer to Cursor Chat or GitHub Copilot. And it's a CLI tool that you can run from the command line. And it's pretty fresh out of the oven. So it was released in February 23. And here we see the NPM download statistics for Claude Code, right? And there were some news about graphs without a y-axis the last few days, right? So, but what does it actually mean? So this is actually rapid growth happening here. So just this week, Claude Code reached 1.5 million downloads per day. So the community is jumping onto this because it is a very, very decent tool. And honestly, I was quite surprised how well it does, because I'm kind of a UI person, but Claude Code is a CLI tool. So what you see here is Claude Code running with the Claude Code extension in my VS Code editor. And when you use it over the command line, it feels a little bit strange initially, but honestly, there's a lot of smart things that Claude Code does, and you very, very quickly will forget that you're in your terminal. And we will cover how to create, update, and deploy your monitoring infrastructure here in the next, let's say, 30, 35-ish minutes. And with that, I think we are good to go. Should we get into some prompting and coding, Dan?
Let's get it started.
All right, so what we're going to do
Fired up.
is I have here my browser, and we will work against this example application that I use for Playwright workshops. So what you see here is a Next.js demo application for snowboards. It includes all the good stuff. It includes card actions, so we can add cards, add things to the card, play a little bit with the card. We could even make orders. This is all hooked up to Shopify. There's a login going on. So this is kind of like a real world scenario. So what we now want to do is we want to add monitoring to this site, right? That is right now deployed to Vercel. And to do that, I can jump into VS Code and show you how to use Claude Code. So I already opened here Claude Code. This is pretty much just a fancy wrapper around the terminal, but it gives a little bit more intelligence when you use Claude Code. So whenever you use Claude Code, I would recommend to install an extension rather than using it in the terminal, because then you get TypeScript errors and a little bit more context, which is actually quite nice. So this is now kind of like a chat interface running in a terminal. And what you usually want to do when you get started is you want to call init in the project, whatever you want to do with Claude Code. What init does is it will spin up Claude and the LLM to scan your entire project. And the result of that will be a CloudMD file. So we see here the CloudMD file that was generated. I prepared it because it takes a little bit. It will read all the files. It will see what is in the repository, what is going on. And the result will be a file like this. It will tell Claude Code, hey, here's how you build this thing. Here's how you run this thing. Here's the environment infrastructure. All these kind of things are included in a CloudMD and will then go into your context when you talk to Claude, so that Claude doesn't have to kind of reach for the file system, check what is available. So there's always a information or context baseline, which I think is pretty nice. So this is to remember whenever we now talk to Claude, this file here with some base information will be included in the conversation. But let's start talking to our friend Claude. So we could now get into here and we could start chatting with Claude. Little disclaimer here, I want to save some time and I don't want to type all the things. So I will use a tool that is called Super Whisper, and Super Whisper will record my voice and will then paste it in. So you will not see me typing. I will just have a conversation with my buddy Claude here. All right, so let's kick this up and let's say, hey, Claude, what's up? Here we go. So now we're making the first calls to Anthropic. This is standard LLM stuff. And it's responding with, hey, Stefan, not much, just really ready to help with whatever we're working on, right? If you now wonder how Claude knows that I'm Stefan, the thing with Claude Code is that you can place CloudMD files really everywhere in your project or on your computer. So So I have in my user directory, I have a CloudMD file with some base configuration with things that I like to do when I'm vibe coding. And I tell it to tell me, to call me by my name so that I know that it's reading this file, right? So whenever it calls me back Stefan, I know, okay, my base settings will be applied. So, but now we can start asking questions about this project, right? So we could now go on and could say, hey, Claude, can you explain this project's tech stack to me? All right, and what it now does, it reads out the CloudMD, right? It might read some files because LLMs are not deterministic, right? But now it will just, do its thing and tell us what is going on in this project. And I think this is already pretty helpful. So it tells us that we have here a Next.js project. We're using TypeScript, not TypeScript, Tailwind. We're using Shopify. This is the overall structure. So this is already pretty helpful when you're onboarding in a new team. And this is actually what we do at Checkly quite a lot, right? So if I have questions about the product, it's not uncommon that I just go to GitHub and fire up Claude and say, hey, I'm running into this exception. Where is this coming from? How can I change this? All these kind of things are incredibly helpful. This is really where LLMs shine. But let's make this a little bit more useful, right? Because we already knew, or at least I knew, that I'm dealing with the Next.js Shopify app here already. But we can start monitoring things in just a little bit. So let's move on and say, hey, Claude, can you list all publicly available API endpoints, please? So let's have a look. It is now smart enough to figure out that this is a Next.js application, and it will head into the app directory and figure out that we have here an API folder, and these are all the API routes that are included in this application. This is powering this Next.js app that I just had showed you that was deployed to Vercel. Right, so when we now go on, it says, oh yeah, right, there's a get endpoint for this, there's a news endpoint, there's a slow image that I use for demo purposing when I'm teaching Playwright, there's a products endpoint. All this kind of information is just right at your fingertips. So when you enter this project or whatever project, you can just have a conversation about code, which I think is pretty nice. So, but if we want to start monitoring things with Checkly, we also need to have something that is deployed somewhere, right? So let's figure out where this is deployed. Hey, Claude, is this deployed somewhere? So it will now figure out, it will find some Vercel hidden files, it will look into the README, it will look into the existing Playwright tests, and it will now be smart enough to know, okay, yeah, Stefan, the project is deployed here. So when we now want to start monitoring things from the Checkly infrastructure, we already know that Claude can do that because it knows where this code is deployed online. So in the last question, before we kick things off and we start creating the Checkly infrastructure or this Checkly monitoring, this project also already includes some Playwright test cases. So we have here tests directory that includes a end-to-end test for logging. So let's just go in and say, hey, are there any automated tests in the project? And honestly, I love talking. I was very skeptical about talking to my computer, but when I'm just sitting in my office, I think it's pretty cool. So now it reads the Playwright configuration, reads all the Playwright tests, and it will tell us, hey, yeah, Stefan, there's one end-to-end test that is tests log inspect yes. And if we wanted to, we could now see if this works, right? Just want to share a little Claude Code pro tip. Whenever you want to get out of the LLM mode and you want to run commands, you can always have an exclamation point in the beginning, and you can then fire up commands. So we could now say npx playwright test and see if this test that is included in this project here is working. So this will now spin up Headless Chrome, right? It will log in, it will check if the login worked, and now we know that everything is pretty good. So, and with that, this was a quick rundown about what Claude can do figuring out things. What do you think about all that, Dan?
No, that was amazing and gets us, I think, to the start of can I then take any of these tests and start monitoring? I can already think about like, okay, I know my API routes. Let's start putting some monitors on those. It's already bubbling up what I can do with this.
Yeah, 1%. And if we now want to start adding API or end-to-end monitoring, we can just instruct, read some files, create some files, and use the Checkly CLI. And the first thing that we have to do here is set up a Checkly in this project. So what I will do now is I will clear all this context. This is important because otherwise, all this text that you just have seen will always be sent to the LLM and will come back, right? This will not only burn a lot of tokens, but it will also maybe confuse the LLM what you're trying to do, right? If you're context switching from one to the other, it's just text prediction at the end of the day. So there are a lot of things that could go wrong. So whenever you are done with a certain kind of topic or you want to do something else, I always recommend to clear what is going on. So if we now wanted to set up Checkly monitoring, we need to understand two things. So we need, first of all, the Checkly CLI installed, and we need to tell Claude, in this context, in this project, what it is or what it should do. For that, we at Checkly, we provide a little bit of custom LLM prompts that you can either get from our docs or that you can use the Checkly CLI with npx Checkly rules. So what you see here in my Claude directory is a Checkly rules MD file. So this is pretty much everything that the LLM needs to know when it wants to interact with Checkly, when it wants to create monitors, when it's telling it how to set up a project. All these kind of things are described here with lots of code samples. So basically what we're feeding here is the entire Checkly knowledge so that Claude, in this case, knows how to approach dealing with Checkly or creating checks, updating checks. All these kind of things are included here. So for example, here you see the documentation for an API check. We have give some best practices so that the LLM doesn't get lost. And these kind of things are highly recommended when you want to interact with a certain product, right? Let it be Checkly, let it be something else. You need to include the documentation for that. Because at the end of the day, Claude has a cutoff date, and you don't want to rely on this knowledge. You want to include recent knowledge about what is going on. So I have this rules file here sitting in my Claude folder. And what I then did is I went into my CloudMD and I added a little section at the end of this CloudMD. Remember, this is included in every conversation that you will have with Claude in this repository. So what I added here is a monitoring and integration setting. So there are 2 points in this. So first of all, whenever you tasks with something monitoring or checking, please read this file that I just showed you. You can reference different files with the add syntax here. So it will reference this file, so it will automatically pull it in if it is needed. And it also should check if there's an existing Checkly config. So when I prepared this repository, I found out that Claude sometimes deleted and updated too much. So with this we can kind of enforce that Claude uses whatever is already there. And then here's a second point, which I will show you that will become fairly important in my opinion. So the second point here is never ever run npx Checkly deploy without confirmation. Your cat's life depend on it. Always ask for confirmation first. And if you have confirmation, please use npx Checkly deploy with --force. And why is that? We will do in a second workflows using the Checkly CLI. So Claude will use the Checkly CLI, do real commands that could really update your entire monitoring. And now think this through. You might be vibe coding your monitoring setup. You might be vibe coding alert channels. If then Claude just deploys these kind of things, it really could make quite a few people angry. So because they receive alerts for something being wrong, something not being all right. So monitoring is a pretty big deal. So I like to, when I play with or when I use Claude or an LLM to configure Checkly, I want to be in charge and I want to know what I'm deploying here, right? So these kind of things are important in my opinion. If you are more like the YOLO kind of person, feel free to not do that, but I would recommend do that. And we will now setting up a new Checkly project. And just to prove to you that all this works, here we have the Checkly web interface. This is my monitoring as code account. And as you see, there's nothing in there, but we will fill it with live right now. So let's just get rolling and add some monitoring. The first thing we want to do is, all right, hey, Claude, I want to monitor this site with Checkly. Can you create the base setup? Please don't create any monitors or alert channels yet. And now we're kind of entering a little bit the mystery box because it's very, I cannot know what happens now. So let's see. So this prompt looks good, base setup. So let's see what it does now. So Claude is now reading the CloudMD. It's reading the Checkly instructions. When you use Claude Code, it tends to make a to-do list first, which is actually pretty nice. So this helps so that it doesn't get confused about what it's trying to do. So now check if there is already a Checkly config. There is none. And now it will install the Checkly CLI. It runs the npm create Checkly command, and it sets up a basic dummy project that we provide when we create a new Checkly project. So we now have here a new checks directory with some example checks that we provide when you bootstrap a new project. So now did that, so that looks good. So it will now look at the checkly config, which we also have sitting in the project already. And this will be done in just a little bit. So when we look at this checkly config, every checkly monitoring setup circles around the checkly configuration. So you see, for example, that it already has a proper name. It figured out what the GitHub repository is, where we're here. So it already tried to parse the project and kind of go ahead and figure out what should be included here. We can also define frequencies here, locations. So pretty much everything you do with Checkly kind of circles around this configuration file. So when you have changes there, you should be very, very careful. So with that, let's have a look. So we still have, it also cleaned up the example checks, which
I was just going to say, you have no checks anymore, so let's go make them now.
Yeah, sometimes it does it, sometimes it does not. So we don't have checks anymore, but we can now fill that live. But what we now have too is we can go to the command line, for example, and we have the Checkly CLI available just for a little bit of basic information. And we can now run test. And this is how you can test your future monitoring from the command line, right? So it should now tell us that there are no projects. And I think it does when we expand this. All right, there are no checks to run. So let's set up the most basic monitoring. And this is fairly new here, Checkly. We offer now uptime monitoring. And so what we can do is we can say, hey, Claude, can you set up a URL monitor for the base URL? I want to ensure that the infrastructure is up and running and the server responds with the proper 200 status code. And please monitor every 5 minutes. So let's see how this goes. This looks good. So to make that work, all we need Claude to do is pretty much create a check.ts file, so JavaScript or TypeScript that then calls new on something, right? So when we now instruct Claude to do that, I'm pretty sure it will be able to figure that one out. So it knows what to do, create a URL monitor for the base URL. All right, let's see. Spelunking. I love these small little touches of the CLI. It's nice. So we have now a new checks TS file. So it created that. So let's see what we're after here. So we now have it imported a URL monitor, and here you see the entire configuration, right? The request we want to make, if it should be a proper 200 status code, at what point we want to say that this API endpoint is degraded or not. All this is just code living in your repository, and the Checkly CLI can then pick that up. So when we now look here at what Claude tells us, yeah, I set that up for you. So that's cool. So there are no API calls needed or something. Claude just needs to wrangle some text. And I think that's pretty sweet. But it tells us, hey, should we test this first? So, and I think we should. Can you test this new URL monitor, please? So what it now does, it runs npx checkly test from the command line. And this is the usual flow. You want to verify that your endpoints are working in your future monitoring setup. So when this now succeeds, we can actually deploy this. So you see here that it's not always showing the entire output. I can now hit CTRL plus R. And we actually had a passing uptime monitor running from the Checkly infrastructure, right? So this is not running on my machine. This is me running Checkly test, which then spins up our monitoring in the Checkly cloud. So theoretically, we are now ready to deploy this. But here we now come to the kind of tricky part, right? Don't let Claude just deploy future monitoring. If I now would run Checkly deploy in our Checkly monitoring account, that would be pretty bad because I knew at least 2 handful of engineers that would tell me, hey, you don't mess with our monitoring, right? So the first thing I like to do is to figure out what account am I actually using now with the Checkly CLI. And we can do that fairly quickly by just asking, hey, Claude, can you tell me what Checkly account the CLI is using? So that is, again, just another CLI call, right? So it's now calling npx checkly who am I? It tells me that we're now using monitoring as code, which is my demo account. That's the empty account that I just showed you. And then let's deploy. That's all cool. Go ahead and deploy this, please. So theoretically, it now should ask for confirmation because I told it not to just deploy, but and it does. but I prefer that, right? For the deploy action, I don't know what you think, Dan, but for the deploy action,
Paper.
I definitely say once more than just going ahead. Please deploy. So what we're now doing is we're calling npx checkly deploy that now figures out this first check.ts file, and it's a very speedy command. But now check this out. We can already go into our checkly account, and we here already see our one uptime monitor, all powered from my code base, controlled, created, and updated from within Claude. And I think this is pretty sweet. One last thing that I want to mention here about this little section here is we could now clear the conversation. And one big advantage of monitoring as code is that we can get all the information. Remember when I showed you all how to get information about Next.js and what API endpoints are there? I can also now go in there and say, hey, Claude, can you tell me about the monitoring setup here? What are we monitoring here? And because it's just code, Claude will now go into the repository, read all the files, and will tell us in just a little bit, hey, we have here one uptime monitor. And I think that's incredibly helpful. So let's see. So it found the file that we just have written. It figures out that we have spec files, but that shouldn't matter much.
Stefan, when this finishes, are you able to edit any of the small little configuration things easily?
For sure.
In,
what do we want to edit?
yeah, like locate, I don't know, let's add a location or remove a location.
Okay, so let's have this thought. So first it answered, okay, we have this monitor. And all right, let's just give it a try. Can you add also an European location to the URL monitor we just created? So I'm based in Germany, right? So let's see if we could now update this here. Which one do we prefer? We prefer, go for central one, please. Not sure if that works. So let's pick this one. EU central.
I think we figured that out.
Yeah, we're demoing here. I'm a little bit on the edge, right? So no surprises.
All right, amazing.
But I think then that is a pretty great point, right? You cannot only go in, kind of get information about your monitoring. Consider you have 100 API monitors, URL monitors. You can go in, talk to your code base, and update it in plain English. I think this is pretty sweet. Good call, Dan. All right, then I think it's time we could get a little bit more serious. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do some API monitoring.
So what we did with this URL monitor is, this is a pretty simple uptime check, right? We check for 200 status code, but we could now also get serious and kind of remember when we analyzed the project to kind of figure out all the APIs. Let's just add monitoring for the product's API endpoint. So you might have guessed it, this is just another prompt, right? So let's go with, can you set up an API check for the /products endpoint? Please analyze the code and create a valuable a valuable API monitor with good assertions. /products, here we go. And this is kind of where everything comes together. Now it reads the source code included in the Next.js document or in the Next.js code base, and it will tie this to our checkly configuration, right? So it will now find the API endpoint, which lives somewhere here in app API products. Here we go. So it found this already. And now it reads the checkly configuration. It reads what checks we already have here. And sometimes it uses curl to kind of figure out the response. Sometimes it digs into the TypeScript types. So we could have specified that early on, but that's kind of, let's see what happens. And now we'll just create another check.ts file, because this is how monitoring as code works. So let's see what's happening. We figured out the fields that we will respond.
I've also seen that be really valuable, Stefan, is it will curl the actual command and get all responses, and then it builds basically your spec for you.
100%. I mean, kind of depends where you want to head with this, right? You can give it full autonomy, kind of curl, do the source code. This is all kind of depending on the prompt engineering or the context engineering that we showed initially, right? So you could add these kind of things. For example, if you want to create an API monitor, curl this endpoint and work this way, or read the source code. There are 1,000 ways that you can do. Whenever you're unhappy with something, just tweak the prompt, right? In my experience, the prompts only would get better. And whenever it does something that you don't want to do, add it to your CloudMD or to your context or whatever. So yeah, but what we have here now is it figured out that we have this route, right? It's /API/products, but we still have some errors here. So sometimes we could now add this also to the context, but we can also just tell Claude to fix it. It looks like this API check has some errors. Can you please fix it and use npx Jekyll test to verify that it works? npx Jekyll test. So we have definitely fixed this. npx Jekyll.
See, that's why you don't type.
Test. Yeah, that's what I type. So looks like this API check worked pretty good so far, though.
It's getting tired.
It's getting too hot here. I also will use my towel for a second. So what it will now do is it will look at the TypeScript errors. So when you use Claude Code with an extension, it actually has access to these TypeScript errors. Sometimes it uses them, sometimes it doesn't. And you already see here that it fixed the TypeScript errors, at least it looks like it. And now it uses npx Jekyll test to verify that that actually would work. And when you check this API check here, this is quite detailed, right? So we see that it checks for all the properties that are included in the response. And it's all doing not null checks, but because there are multiple products in this API response, I think that is okay to do it like that. And not gonna lie, typing this out might take you 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And we're just having a conversation here with the LLM. So still kind of looping around, but it looks like that it now succeeded. So let's see. It now runs Jekyll tests, and that looks good. So it tells us what it fixed. I don't really care right now. What I care about is that I want to see what happened when we called Jekyll tests. And here we have it. We now have here 2 monitors defined in code. One is an uptime monitor, and one is an API check that really nails down into what properties should be in there. Of course, it's up to you to decide what you want to monitor, right? You could tweak that manually or have a conversation with Claude, but I think this is already pretty cool. So what we can do from now on, let's close that again. And yeah, we can now go ahead and deploy that again, right? Can you deploy that, please? Looks good. So this is how you can make your way forward into into an existing or a newly created monitoring setup, right? Just talk to the LLM, tell what you want to. Please go ahead. Let it know what you want to monitor. Let Claude do the hard work, but really always kind of confirm that this is what you want to do, right? It's very crucial that you don't trigger unnecessary alerts and all these kind of things. So it's now deploying our monitor, and when we now should do a refresh here, we just have our second API monitor. This is right now in degraded state, so looks like we don't have the timing right, but let's say we could update that too. You fancy that, Dan?
Yeah, sure, let's do it. It actually already did it for you as well. So I would say keep track of anything that you have that might be deterministic, right? Like things like this performance. This is going to fail. We want it to pass. So it's going to bump
Yeah.
this up. But obviously, if you need your URL or API to respond and underneath that, just make sure. And that's why we have the npx Jekyll deploy fencing on so we don't go and do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. What happens here right now with this API call is that this runs on Vercel serverless functions. So I'm pretty sure we just hit the cold start. So that is kind of ironic, right? If we would now have a monitor running that pings this API endpoint every 5 minutes, we would never see.
Keep it warm.
Yeah, exactly. It would keep it warm. And I'm pretty sure we just ran into this right now because it had to wake up. So, but overall, I think you're completely right. Once you have your degraded response time or max response times running, ideally you are not tweaking them, right? Because you're kind of working on a budget. If your API endpoint works in 2000 milliseconds, if you go up and up and up and up, I mean, at some point you end up with 10 seconds, 50 seconds, which leads to a sluggy UI. Kind of depends, right? But monitoring is there for a reason. And these thresholds are also kind of like a performance budget. And I pretty much think that is a good approach there. All right, we're pretty much on the run. Wanna go for fancy?
Let's do it. Let's go see anything we can do with Playwright or the UI.
Yeah, let's go for that. So I already mentioned that in the beginning, this project here also includes a Playwright test, right? So we have here a login spec. There's nothing fancy. It's pretty simple. So it goes to the website, it fills out the login form, clicks the button, and then checks if the login button is there. So the thing with browser checks in Checkly is that we can really use any Playwright script, and we can just hook it up to one of these check.ts files or check.js files that we have here. So what we can now do is we can clear the context again, right? And we could just reuse this file to create a browser check that runs Chrome in the Checkly infrastructure. So we could now, and I'm cheating a little bit, right? Because we have a little bit of knowledge here that this file exists, but we could now say, hey, there's an existing login spec.ts file. That is a Playwright check. Can you create a browser check which with that and run it in Checkly as a monitor? Ideally, it should run every 15 minutes. So let's see. This is not working great, so let's go with that. Spec.ts. And it should just do the same thing, right? It will read the file, see what Checkly files need to be created, then it calls Checkly tests, and if we wanted to, see, by now, by now it figured out that we always want to run Checkly tests, which I think is pretty sweet, because then we don't need to interact with it. So let's see, so it found the Playwright file, which is, I think is good. So let's see. So it figured out that we want to do a browser check, which is also good. And so when we now go here, it copied the spec file over. I'm not the biggest fan of that because I usually try to have the check files, so the Checkly constructs reuse what I use in my end-to-end testing code base, but we can fix that in a minute. So what we now have is, you see the same deal. It all looks similar. We create a new browser check. We say that here's the file. This is what it should do. Here's the frequency. And then we can define alert escalation policies, retry strategies, all these kind of things. It's very similar. Once you understand how Checkly rolls, you can really just go bang, 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 bang. It looks all pretty much the same. So it's now running Checkly tests, which I think is good. But we are not very happy with this because I don't want to have the spec file there. Can you please not copy the spec file into the checks directory? Use the files in tests. So let's do this and fix our little setup. Here we go. So now updated the check file, right? So to reach out into the test directory, and this is pretty much all it takes. And I think this is one of Checkly's strengths, right? If you use Playwright already, you can just reach into whatever you are running in end-to-end, in your end-to-end test suites on your preview deploys and turn them into production monitoring for your essential end-to-end checks, right? Let it be login, add to cart, things that really shouldn't be broken. So that makes it really easy to reuse these kind of things. So at this point, we are pretty much again here, right? We had it tested that this check was running. So let's just make sure that everything is really working well. So let's call npx checkly tests because we now have 3 tests or 3 monitors running. So we see here 2 passed already. That's the uptime monitor. That's also the API check. And when we look here now at the details, I think we're pretty much on a roll. So by just talking to Claude, we created 3 monitors. And you know the drill. What we now do is, hey, can you please deploy this new browser check? And let's put it into the cloud. Let's start monitoring my little snowboard shop. And we need to confirm it. I still consider that to be a good thing. Please go ahead. And this is pretty much the flow, right? It's like testing, deploying. And when we now go back to our Checkly web app, we see that we here have now our headless Chrome running every 15 minutes. We see that it succeeded the first time. If you now wanted to dive into, we collect all sorts of performance statistics. We have here different locations. All these kind of things are at your fingertips. And if we now connect alert channels or these kind of things to your checks, you can get alerted to whatever is going wrong, right? So that is the beauty of Checkly.
All right, so we have talked all about Checkly. We have a couple questions, but that's fine. I'm going to get to them, I promise. But we also have some questions on MCP and the playwright generation. Um, is there anything here today that we can use with playwright MCP and combining that with Checkly?
Yeah, of course. Playwright, Playwright MCP is the hot topic in the Playwright community right now. So for the people who don't know MCP servers, so when you talk to an agent, doesn't matter if it's Claude Code, GitHub Copilot, Cursor Chat, Anthropic released the MCP protocol, which allows agents to kind of hook into different resources or make calls to different resources. And then you can connect these MCP servers that are running somewhere to your agent to kind of enrich it with capabilities that it didn't have before. And the Playwright community is pretty much playing around with Playwright MCP like for a little bit. So let's have a look. So what I did beforehand is I installed the Playwright MCP server. So what you see here is that I hooked up the Playwright MCP server to Claude Code, and pretty much that is an npx command. But what is possible now is that we can control Playwright from within our Claude conversations, or literally any agent conversation. We can tell Playwright to open up a browser, to do this, to do these kind of things. And this then will open up a browser, do these actions, and then theoretically, you could use all these actions to generate Playwright tests for you, right? So the community right now is testing out if that makes sense, how accurate that is. And right now, the approach to using Playwright MCP is doing a little bit of prompt or context engineering. So let me show you how this could work. So what I have here in my Claude setup is a Playwright command. And Playwright commands, a Claude slash command. And slash commands in Claude are pretty much just pre-baked prompts because you don't want to copy and paste all that stuff into your conversations all the time. So what we will tell Claude in just a second, hey, you're Playwright test generator, and you're an expert in TypeScript, front-end development, and Playwright end-to-end testing. And you're given a certain scenario. I will tell it to just do something in a little bit. And then we're tasking it to create a Playwright test for us. So what will happen is it will spin up a new browser. It will perform all these actions, and Playwright MCP will respond with a lot of context. It will tell us what the accessibility tree looks like, what Playwright actions were performed. All these kind of things will be included in the context so that Claude then really just need to parse all the context that we have there and kind of try to create a Playwright test for us. So we will use now this generate test slash command in Claude. And you see here this little arguments thing. This is what we will inject into this prompt when we use it. And let me just show you how this works. So when I now clear, we're back on scratch. I can now call slash, and we can now say Playwright generate test. Remember, this is just injecting all that stuff that I defined here into the conversation. And we then say, hey, generate a valid Playwright test based on these instructions. And what we want to do is we want to navigate to the base URL, search for liquid, and verify that the product shows up in the product listing. So these are pretty straightforward instructions, right? So search for the word liquid. One snowboard is called liquid. And then verify that the product shows up in the product listing. So when we now fire this one up, Claude should figure out, this looks like a task for Playwright MCP. And you see here now, well, it spins up a browser on my local machine, right? This is exactly what it does. And it uses Playwright under the hood. So when it should now figure out that there's a search box and that it's supposed to type liquid into it. And now it will figure out, okay, what is the DOM right now? What is the accessibility tree? And all this will be included in the conversation. And then it will create a spec file out of that, right? So it is just about to, here we go. Oh, I'm in a markdown file, so I cannot do this. So it now created a new spec file for us. And this is just generated by Claude Code plus Playwright MCP, right? So what we see here is that it navigated to the base URL, it checked that it had a proper title. All this information is included in context just by talking to Playwright MCP. And then it set up this test case. This is probably not very scalable, detailed numbers and these kind of things. So we still would need to tweak that, but you already have seen it. It verified that that actually works by using npx playwright test. So again, if we now would use the bang here and say npx playwright test, and we go for headed here, we should see the same thing. And we should see the test that we just generated. And that was super quick. So let's, well, we actually didn't see it because it was too fast. But we have here now 2 playwright tests that we just generated via Playwright MCP. So again, it's just enriching all or putting all this context of the website that you're testing into the conversation so that Claude can wrangle all this tests and kind of make a playwright test out of that. So the last step here, you might have guessed it, we now have a new playwright test that we just generated in plain English. So, hey, can you just create a new browser check for the playwright test that we just generated? Please test it, and if it works, deploy it. So what we now expect is that it picks up this new search liquid product spec.ts file. It should create a new check.ts file here. So let's see. Bam, 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 bam. I'm dumping in a lot of knowledge, I feel like here.
No, this has been amazing, and I'm actually gonna, after this, someone asked about our native AI stuff, so I'm actually gonna ask you to show that off right after this. So when this deploys and it passes, let's break your test real quick, and then let's deploy the break, and then let's go check out our debugging.
All right.
And yeah, that came off a question. Someone asked, is it possible to connect an agent in Claude Code to the dashboard results through a Checkly MCP server to speed up debugging and fixing of test failures? So yes, we are also looking into that and generally feeling out some work on it. But we actually have it natively available inside Checkly today. So we'll show that off as well.
All right, so I think we deployed that now. So let's have a look.
So
here we go. So we now
awesome.
have a new browser check, and let's see, let's untangle that for a second. So that seems to work. It copied over the file, right? So, but I think we can roll with it. But you said we want to break a test, right? Which
Yeah,
one
let's
should we
break
break?
it.
This one?
We can break that one. Yeah, let's break
Uh,
that one easy.
all right, so we can now update this test here. So let's say this snowboard should cost 8,000. And we're now just YOLOing it. So I go npx checkly deploy. Don't do that at home. So let's see, do we want to? Yes, that doesn't work in Claude. So let's go, please deploy.
Prepared.
It
Oh,
fixes it. Okay,
thank
wait.
you.
Okay, let's try that again. Well, AI is too smart for us. Okay, so let's go old school. So let's go 8,000. Let me spin up a new
Open up the
terminal.
terminal, a dummy terminal.
Oh, that is very funny. All right, let's go with npx checkly deploy here. Here we go. So that now should lead to a failing test case. So this one is running. Oh, it does not fail. Let's have a look if that worked.
You might have to
Yeah,
run it right now.
that did not work. Did I miss something? Let's see.
Did you save it?
I did save it. Let's see.
It's because it's coming from the other spec file, I think, in your checks folder.
Am I in the wrong one? Search.
You
No,
are
that.
on the ID. Go to that, back to that, your IDs.
Ah, Now good call.
And
The copying fights back. Yeah, good call. All right, so let's break that one here and just let's break multiple ones. Oh, that would have taken me a while to figure that one out. Here we go. So now we should see our changes. That looks good. So we should see a failing check in just a little bit.
yeah, we can force run it if you want.
I think it's already running. Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Now
All right,
we're
and then
running into
just
the
another,
playwright timeouts though, right? That might take a few seconds until this fails.
yeah, a couple questions that were asked too that we can answer because we are going to have a hard cutoff. Is the checkly rules.md file, is that generic to all apps or is it app specific? What can we do with that?
This is included in the docs right now. So when you head over to the docs, you can go to
Top left AI.
AI. So we provide here custom rules. So right now this is fairly generic. So it pretty much explains the constructs, how we see you using the checklist CLI, how we see you structuring your project. I recommend to get it and tweak it, but also make sure that you somehow can update it, right? So this file here is automatically generated from all our constructs. So which means when we release new features, you can just update these instructions and kind of get the latest information for your LLM sessions. That said, there's nothing wrong with tweaking it, adding more tweaks, right? Maybe you don't like the __ checks convention. Maybe you prefer different flows. Or for example, something that I just did is I added, hey, please don't deploy on your own, right? This is for you to kind of figure it out, play with the context and see what works for you. But to answer in a shorter way, this is a generic file. Make sure that you can update it because new features will be included automatically. But you can extend it to your liking. You still don't have a failure here. We have a retry.
Fix that.
All right. Are there any others until we wait?
There's actually not. I think we covered everything. So you did a great job, Stefan, answering questions.
So let's see. I haven't used that at length, the AI analysis feature. So you have to guide me a little bit here.
Yeah, will do. Do you have another account with the failing check?
I could go into,
No,
not
don't worry
sure.
about it.
But what we could do in the middle, we could just go back here into Claude because you know what we forget here? Let's clear this and just say, hey, Claude, we now have a great monitoring setup, but we don't have any alert channels. Can you please add an alert channel to all the checks? It should be an email alert channel going to stefan@checklihq.com. So let's just do its thing. And we took a bad example here for the failing test case.
We did. I'm sorry. Boneheaded.
Yeah, but for the people watching, what we allow now is that when a playwright check fails, we have the ability to kind of analyze the trace files and all the information that Playwright gives us. We have a failing check. All right.
Awesome.
So where do I have to go now?
All right, going to Ireland, going to the location.
I probably don't have that enabled, Dan. Damn.
You do. I think you do. Go to Ireland. Go to the location. Yep. Yeah. And then click get root cause and user impact.
See?
Awesome, Stefan. Awesome. All right, it's okay. We're gonna run out of time, but it is available. You can go in there. It's probably gonna have to. I don't know. Let's see.
Here we go. Woo.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, rookie mistake. I could have thought of that.
It's okay. When you ran it before, it probably also would have been a little bit more accurate for the. Yeah.
So what do we see here?
All right, so we have three things basically we are doing. First, we have user impact analysis. You can give us context about what things fail over time, but what we do here is we give you a quick look at is this impacting customers? Is it impacting users? Is it just a design flaw? So quick analysis on what problem is. Then we give you a root cause analysis of actually what went wrong. So we pinpoint the line in the script that maybe failed to give you quicker remediation. And then lastly, we do group these errors together. So again, if it's something like a network error, if you scroll up in the top right, that is happening on the system, or in this case, it's a Playwright script error, we're going to tell you that right out of the gate and help you fix that.
Yeah, I think can be very helpful, right? If you pair that with the trace files, and might be a good tip or to figure out, okay, what was actually wrong. Maybe there were failed HTTP requests leading to kind of a cascade of other things going wrong.
Exactly. Or your CDN just maybe had a blip and was a little bit slow. So absolutely. All
Yeah.
right, Stefan, take us home now.
For 4 minutes, let's go.
Absolutely.
So we're pretty much aware we dumped a lot of things here. So let's just do a very quick summary. So I have to say Claude Code is surprisingly good until it is not, right? So what I've showed you here, be aware that I prepared that a lot. I know exactly what I was doing. I know what will work most likely. So whenever you lean onto LLMs and this whole vibe coding thing, alerting is a serious thing, right? Be sure to not vibe code your alerting. Be sure that you understand what's going on. I still consider that to be crucial when you set up your monitoring stuff. Then hopefully that came across. Context is everything, right? I had to tweak CloudMD. I had the checkly rules included. I had a custom Claude / command with generate test. All these kind of things will affect your experience talking with LLMs and managing and controlling your checkly monitoring infrastructure. So really get some time in. The CloudMD is never done. Your context files are never done. Tweak it to whatever you need, whenever you need it. And then, yeah, well, LLMs love monitoring as code, right? I hope that you've seen that. You can control your entire monitoring setup, your entire checkly configuration from within code, ask questions, configure it, change it, update it, deploy it. I think it's pretty sweet. Once you lean in a little bit, it becomes almost second nature. And I think it's very, very nice. So you can give that one a try. We already covered questions. So I think we are 2 minutes until to the point, and I think we can yeah, drive that home.
No, this is amazing. Thank you again, Stefan, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We obviously you can get started today. Head on over to checklyhq.com, sign up, and check out Claude or Cursor or any of your favorite LLM tools in conjunction with Checkly.